Welcome back to Further with Ford. We are streaming live from Dearborn, Michigan to the world. And this is the last session. This session is called Decoding Design. And we welcome questions to be submitted. I want to encourage people who are watching this on the internet to use Twitter and the hashtag #Designinginnovation to submit your questions. Now this afternoon, I'm panelist moderator. I'll be Robert Tercek, and I'll be introducing three gifted designers who are joining us: Jane MacGonigal, Gadi, Amit, and our first speaker comes from Ford, where he is the Vice President of Design. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Moray Callum. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert.
You're welcome.
You know, I'm often asked, what does a car designer do? Do I really get to draw cars all day and get paid for it? Or am I some kind of engineer because, you know, cars come out of computers? One of the designers in the team has this on his wall in his office. And quite frankly, I think it shows my dilemma. And if you look at this, apparently all I do is drink coffee all day, but I do a little bit more than that. But although designers still work with sketches, still work with clay and computer models, the really important medium of the designer is behavior. We're constantly observing how customers behave and what their aspirations are, and coding that into our designs to improve the way consumers interact with our creations. When we design a car, we don't just look at aesthetics. We need to shape the experience for the user. We need to design their impression, how they'll interpret it, how they'll feel about it, make it clear that what they can do with it, and hopefully how it will improve their daily lives. All this information is coded into the design. We determine how people will look at it and assess our products at different stages. And then the consumer subliminally decodes it. That's if we've done our job right. And it doesn't happen just once in time. It happens at different stages along the way. That's why it's not just designing a specific product, but rather about designing the entire journey. A very emotional one, orchestrated around the consumer, in a sequential timeline also. So let's take a look at a few of the main scenes of that timeline. A person's first read on a car happens from a distance. Proportions, stance, silhouette all communicate the character of the car. A Mustang, for example, has a low stance, powerful hood, fast profile, code for performance. An F-150 has a strong, bold, purposely built structure, code for tough, code for truck. A Fusion has an innovative silhouette that differentiates from the usual three-box sedan. It communicates its character very clearly. The code, a sedan, but you know what? It might be fun to drive. As you get closer, the design starts to communicate the brand attributes. Unmistakably Mustang for Mustang. In the case of F-150, built Ford tough. The Fusion, the face of Ford. Once you're close enough to touch the vehicle, it's about the details, the craftsmanship, the fit and finish, the materials, the refined surface language, the details on the windows, the grille, the gaps, the finishes, etc. The touch and feel of the door handle. It's all about the message that these elements give out and allows the customer to perceive the quality of the product. Now, the exterior design has set an expectation. And quite frankly, if you haven't got this part right, the customer might not be interested in the next phase, the interior. This has to deliver and complement the prior experiences. The journey continues as you pull the handle and open the door. Like the exterior, you're either seduced or not. That is a rational moment. That is not a rational moment. It's all about creating an emotional connection. We have a split second to get that first impression right. People need to instantly see and feel what the brand delivers. We do that through shapes, materials, colors, volume distribution, how we break up the mass in the interior. The second read on the interior is a personal one. We call it fit. Does the car fit me? Can I fit my stuff? Will I be comfortable with these surroundings? Codes are established that get you engaged as you fit in the vehicle. And then there's the stuff. Where do I put my coffee? Where do I put my purse? How do I connect with my network and my content? Now we finally get to the third stage, start. Probably our biggest differentiator from products and product design. we actually get to go somewhere in our object. The first experience is a tactile one. Push button, wheel, shifter, all communicate the character. The interaction with the controls gives the drive feeling. But there is more. The cinematic effect is coming to life as well. The car is establishing a dialogue. The way relevant information is orchestrated enhances the driver experience, or completely confuses it if we don't get it right. We need to make sure all the pieces come together in something very easy to interpret. The amount of information and technology that we expect the consumer to know and understand is the area that's probably changed the most in the history of car design and is accelerating quickly. If you look back at the first Model T, although a little complicated to start, once you were moving, you only had the driving to concentrate on. Since then, many features have been added. And when I say many features, I mean quite a few features, and even more features, and really quite a lot of features. So you would think if anyone should know what all these symbols mean, it would be me. Guess what? I look at this and I think I know what that means, but maybe I don't. And so half of them I probably do know. So in fact, when you take a closer look at these, and you realize there's still some work need to be done. Like, for example, what does this mean? Is it put the car in a washing machine? Next one. I like this one. I just shopped at Target and I'm on my way home. And not for the kids in the room, this is for adult gas only. The point is, and the serious point is, we want to give the consumer all the latest technologies that enhance the driving experience. But if it becomes overwhelming, a distraction, we have failed. Getting the balance right is getting the experience right. It's an ongoing process. New technologies mean new rules and new opportunities. Not tech for tech's sake, but for a better experience. And today, of course, we need to take into account not just the product we are working on, but the broader system it will be part of. Take this New York taxi driver, for example. 6 screens in his car. Each of them is critical to getting the job done. The challenge becomes, how do we code design so a vehicle's behavior is modified to whatever you want, when you want it, when you need it. We do our job best when you enjoy that technology without knowing the back end. All you interact with is a pleasant and effective interface. All you need to consider is, how does this allow me to be a better dad, a better husband, a better coach, boss, even a taxi driver, and stay in control of my life. It's the same rules as before, but much more info to code into the designs. And there's more on an emotional journey that happens when you want to drive a car. It will be completely different when you approach a car that you don't want to drive, but instead it wants to drive you. But the principles will be exactly the same. It will still be about coding an entire journey and pushing ourselves to do better with every design, with the goal of appealing to the heart and mind of customers, but also coding a sense of wonder that makes people smile, and even if they can't explain why. So hopefully we'll have a great conversation, and looking forward to the progress. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Robert.
Thank you, Murray. Continuing with Decoding Design, our next speaker comes to us from Good Deal Design, where he is the principal designer. Please welcome to the stage, Gadi Amit. There you are.
Hi there. Good afternoon. I'm the principal designer of NewDealDesign, and what we do, we design technology objects. I'm sure we probably have at least a ton of these around here. The motto of the company, it speaks about brains, bravery, and magic. And this is a very interesting industry now. Technology moved from industrial design or product design to something that is a hybrid of industrial design, software design, sometimes experience design. We are now talking about even creating new business models through the design process. So I'm going to take you through 3 projects that we've experienced in the last few years. The first one is about rebuilding the mobile phone industry. Mobile phone industry is actually a very monolithic business with amazing products, amazing design. The one thing that they do quite poorly compared to the car industry is giving the end customer options. So we've been engaged by Google about a year ago to create a new type of mobile device. And this is what it is. This is Project Ara. And it's about a modular mobile phone platform. It allows you to exchange different modules, actually color and change the appearance of the model by 3D printing, and exchange different technology packages through a whole economy, ecosystem that will have many third parties that contribute. So, for example, you could have a few cameras that you'll take with you, and you could actually exchange the cameras while you're here in the room, for instance. The other thing is that, for instance, you have a call and you see the battery is going dead, and you could actually swap the battery. There's something we call hot swappability, which is a jargon name, means that you could actually detach the battery and reattach a new one without losing the call. And this is becoming real. You could also change the screen. If you, for instance, drop the phone and the screen cracked, you could actually replace it with a new screen or a different screen. You could play into a cutting-edge, high-end, expensive device, or you could actually create very low-cost devices. And this is where Project Ara is specifically geared towards the other 5 billion people who cannot afford, $1,000 phone. So there are many options. There are materials that are more, say, natural, like wood, and there are materials that are basically going to be created and printed from a picture, for instance. You took, let's say, in Mexico, and you see some color palette that you like, and we could actually create a pattern from that and print it, and this will be your phone. The other project I want to talk about is a project we've done a few years back, which is reimagining a camera. And this was the Litro camera. And the Litro camera started from a human gesture that is very much like a kaleidoscope or a scope. You look at the world like that. You don't lock your arms like in a traditional camera. You actually more viewing the world through a lens. And this is the design that launched Litro to quite a lot of publicity. A lot of the process in design, and it's something that Moray just showed us the beautiful studio here. The interesting thing about design is a lot of the process is still done by hand. And this is an example here of a designer hand guessing the right sizes and the right proportions of the camera, including the center of gravity. Ren Ang, the founder of Litro, wanted the shutter button to be exactly at the center of gravity. So we pulled a pen and we sketched and put some napkin calculations, and guess what happened? 9 months later, the designer more or less guessed where that technology will be. And for me, it's kind of an ultimate testament to control of the environment, the control over the proportions, the control over the relationship between different parts of the object. Now, the camera is actually quite interesting in the make. It's actually loaded into a tube, a square tube, and has quite a lot of components in it. And part of that was done in my studio. And we had a lot of discussions about colors, and it's a very important subject of what we do in design. Color is a very emotive quality and is subject for a lot of debate. So a lot of the problems we have now in the technology world is actually get more and more options out there. And in the case of Litro, we eventually had 3 options. Now, another aspect of what we do in technology or design for technology is the amalgamation of both hardware and software. And what you'll see here in this sketch is how we change the current UI paradigm, user interface paradigm of cameras from the traditional point, shoot, and then look into another menu and watch the archive into something else, which is basically flicking back and forth. All the images are basically one linear archive. The new images are coming from the right and are stored on the left as one continuous roll. Now, the last topic I want to talk is a little bit more general. It's quite popular nowadays. We've done a lot of wearable devices. So I just want to expose some of the considerations we have when we talk about these devices. One of them, for instance, is the Fitbit Flex. We've been designing Fitbit products ever since Fitbit became a company. We have enormous problems of sizes. You could see here dad and the young son have probably a difference of 200 pounds between them. They are completely different environments, if you wish, from a geometric perspective. Fashion is a very dynamic field, but what's more interesting that we are all changing fashion nearly few times a day. So you see people switching, from morning to midday to afternoon to evening, and they do things and they use clothes differently. There is an emotional connection to how you look and how you're being perceived by your social reference group. And this is a huge issue with wearables. There are a lot of topics that relate to gender. What is masculine, what is feminine, what is in between. There are issues of fit. People, whatever you'll design, eventually they'll take what they want to and they'll wear it the way they prefer to. And that's one of the most elusive factors in design for wearables. And the other thing that I want to say about wearables, there are about 20 different placements today, and there are probably more and more that wearables will be placed. And these are also a huge challenge. Now, if it's done correctly, what you need to do is to have a flexible placement. And in this case, you see the proto design of the original Fitbit that was intentionally made to be clipped and attached anywhere. And when you do that, you could actually get to places that usually are quite difficult to explain and to get decisions on. This, by the way, this placement is called, in a sanitized language, BFC, which means bra front and center. That turned out to be 60% of the original placements of Fitbit. There is a nuanced presence that these devices should have so they could actually mingle with adjacent jewelry, with other devices, with clothing items, and so on. And the most important thing for me today is that there is a constant battle between bombardment of data to what you really need to have meaningful life. So for me, this is a very succinct image. And our ability to reconnect to our loved ones, to people around us, is somewhat limited by, or becoming more limited by these technology gadgets. So we need to find ways to actually fight back and create the right balance to allow people to interact. And with that, I would offer kind of a solution, and we need some kind of a new definition. Rather than having smart devices, we need to have wise devices. Wise devices are devices that are combining some level of filtering, some kind of a very subtle ambient UI, and possibly some tactile qualities through haptic devices. That's all.
Thank you, Gadi. So while we have this great collection of designers present, I want to encourage people who are watching the live stream to use the hashtag #Designinginnovation on Twitter and submit some questions to them. This is a great opportunity to connect with great designers. So far, what we've heard from Moray and from Gadi is about the process of designing experience into physical objects. But that's only one aspect of design. There's another aspect of design that's also exciting, which is designing experiences for people to achieve different things in their lives. And we're very fortunate today to have one of the world's leading experts on this subject with us. She is the best-selling author of Reality is Broken. Please welcome Jane MacGonigal.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm super excited to be here today to help decode game design. I am a game designer and a game scientist. That means I research the psychology and neuroscience of gameplay. I'm really fascinated with how games change, how we think and act in real life, how they change what we hope for and dream for in our real lives, and what our strategies are for achieving those goals. And I thought I would start today by sharing some good news from my research with you. Are you guys ready for some good news? Yes? Okay, here it is. 1 billion gamers worldwide. We have recently reached this critical milestone for humanity. This is 1 billion people who spend at least an hour a day playing video games. You guys look less excited about this than I was expecting. That's okay, it's fine. Maybe you're a little bit worried. That's a common reaction. I hear it a lot. And I will concede that people who worry that maybe we're spending a little too much time playing video games, they do have some compelling statistics on their side. For example, the fact that we spend 300 million minutes a day currently playing Angry Birds, that does seem maybe a little excessive. You know, if you add it all up, we've spent 400,000 years so far avenging this terrible crime. You guys heard about this, right? The bad piggy stole the eggs from the birds, and the birds got mad, and then we got mad on their behalf. For 400,000 years, we've been avenging that. If you think about more hardcore games like Call of Duty, the average Call of Duty player spends 170 hours every single year playing just this one game. Now, that's the equivalent of a month of full-time work playing just this one game. And in fact, recently, and every time a new Call of Duty game comes out, 1 in 4 players worldwide called in sick to stay home and play this game on the day it came out. So they are playing like it's their jobs. Why is this? There's some good research to shed some light on this phenomenon. Gallup research, for example, looking at the engagement and happiness and well-being of people at the workplace, have found that 81% of people who have jobs are not happy at their jobs. 81% of people specifically do not feel engaged at the workplace. They don't feel like they have a sense of meaning and purpose to the work that they do every day. They don't feel like they're developing skills and abilities. They don't feel like their unique strengths are being called into action every day. They don't feel like they're collaborating or connecting with people that they care about. And Gallup has estimated that this actually costs companies worldwide $3.1 trillion every single year down the drain, simply because people aren't inspired at the workplace. And that's just in productivity costs. So you can imagine the cost to innovation and creativity when people show up and they feel checked out and disengaged. In the United States, this problem starts earlier. We see that it starts in school, actually. So the longer you stay in school in the United States, the less engaged you become. This is not a positive trend line. It starts out with kids when they're in elementary school. It's 8 out of 10 students feel optimistic about their chances for success, and they say they care about what they're learning. By the time they get to middle school, it's only 6 out of 10. By the time they get to high school, it's only 4 to 10 students still feel engaged, that they are actually improving real skills and abilities, that they care about what they're learning. So when you look at these two areas of disengagement, it helps explain why we're funneling 7 billion hours a week globally into fictional problems, into virtual challenges. We are hungry for a chance to have that sense of wholehearted engagement with challenges that really inspire and motivate and energize us. So I call this the engagement economy, and it's something that product designers and experience designers and education designers of all kinds are trying to figure out how to tap into. How can we get that same level of enthusiasm and excitement and motivation into real-world problems or real-world experiences? These numbers are only going to go up, by the way. We know in the United States, 99% of boys under 18 spend at least an hour a day gaming, and 94% of girls under 18 are also gaming on average an hour a day. This is more good news. We've closed the gender gap, which is great. So we know that the numbers will go up. And in fact, if you look again at the United States, 92% of I know, shocking, but good, I swear, it's good news. 92% of 2-year-olds are already playing digital games on their parents' phones and tablets. By the way, I don't know if you guys can see, I love this photo. You see the drool coming down? Totally sums up this generation's feeling about digital entertainment. So, when you look at these statistics, it's pretty clear. This is by Rob Mahey, a cultural critic. He said recently, it's inevitable. Soon we'll all be gamers. So what does this mean for how we're changing how we think and act in our real lives and what we hope for from the world around us? Well, I've been researching this for more than a decade. I only have time to share with you a couple big ideas today. One has to do with what gamers say they seek when they play. These are the top 10 positive emotions of gaming. If we look at gamers, we ask them, what makes you pick up a game? What are you hoping to change in how you feel? This describes that motivation. They want to feel joy. They want to feel relief, usually from feelings like frustration, anger, loneliness, stress. They want to feel love. This surprises people. We think of games as being maybe they're violent themed or they make us ruthlessly competitive. But 3 out of 4 gaming hours today are actually spent playing collaboratively or cooperatively. And there's a lot of trust in relationships being built up in games. They say they want to feel surprise. If something unexpected happens, they want to feel pride, or they're getting better at something. They're improving their skills, they're setting goals and really achieving them. They want to feel curiosity, what's going to be around the corner, what's on the next level, what's the solution to this puzzle. They want to feel excitement, of course. So many games get our adrenaline going and the blood flowing to all the attention centers of our brain. We enjoy that feeling. We want to feel awe and wonder when we play games. That's what we feel when we're connected to something bigger than ourselves. It could be a massively multiplayer community where everybody cares about the same goals. It could be just a heroic story where the narrative inspires us, makes us feel like we're on a truly important mission. They say they want to feel contentment, which is an underrated emotion. It means that you're happy with what you're doing. You wouldn't rather be doing anything else. That's why we usually don't see gamers checking their text messages or emails while they're playing. Their focus is fully on the game. They're happy with what they're doing. And the last thing they say they want to feel is creativity, which is really interesting, right? The #1 reason people play games is they want the chance to make decisions, to explore options, to try new strategies, to build new things, and the sense of creative agency, the ability to have a visible impact on the world around you, albeit a virtual world, is the #1 thing that drives gamers. And what's cool about these positive emotions is we know now from research that gamers can provoke them anytime, any place, no matter what they're feeling. If you are depressed, if you are bored, if you are anxious, if you are in physical pain, if you're going through a stressful period in your life, if you are a frequent gamer, you have the ability to change how you feel in the moment and to turn away from negative emotion towards positive emotion. And this is fascinating kind of superpower to have, because people who experience on average more positive emotions than negative emotions in their daily lives experience a huge cascade of benefits. They become more ambitious. They set higher goals for themselves. They're better able to recruit allies and collaborators, so they get more help with achieving these newly ambitious goals. They have more physical energy, so they're likely to put more time and effort into achieving these more ambitious goals. And they're more optimistic and resilient. When things are difficult, they're less likely to give up. So in all of these ways, kind of mental, emotional, social, and physical resilience, gamers seem to be taking these positive emotions and using them to build up this real-life resilience. And I could share with you some more research, but I thought maybe better to just give you a really intuitive sense of what I mean. So I want to show you some pictures of gamers while they're playing, and see if you can spot signs of resilience on their faces. It's very subtle, so look closely. See if you can figure it out. Okay, so here we go. Right, so leaning in, literally leaning into something challenging, biting the tongue, that's a sign of relish. It means he feels powerful. We feel powerful when we have these positive emotions. You can see here this kind of fierce determination, right? This one I like. You know, it looks like a negative emotion, but it's not. It's that sense of grit and perseverance, of putting all your effort and ability into trying to solve a problem that you feel like capable of actually successfully solving. This is what we call the flow phase. It's sort of blissed out. You lose sense of time and space because you feel like you're so immersed in meeting the challenge. I love this guy because I think if you didn't know he was playing a game, you'd be worried about him. The pupils are dilated, the nostrils are flared. But what's great is when you have access to these positive emotions, you are able to hang in there where things get tough. He's clearly about to fail. That's fine. Gamers do fail 80% of the time, right? 8 out of 10 times. They don't get the score they want. They don't finish the level. They have to try again. And when you have these positive emotions and all the resilience they give you, you can go from a face like this to a face like this, where you surprise yourself with what you're capable of achieving, this kind of epic win face. And when I look at these faces, I'm reminded of a quote by an old psychologist, Brian Sutton Smith. He said this 30 years ago, before most of us were playing video games. He said, the opposite of play isn't work, it's depression. Now, how true that is. We've been taught to think that play and work are complete opposites, and we have to keep them separate. But in fact, when you look at those faces, you see that playing games is hard work. It requires a lot of mental energy and effort and motivation. And you can also see this absence of what we normally associate with depression. There's no pessimism about our skills or abilities. And there's not this sort of lack of physical energy or desire to engage with things that are difficult. Those are the two core symptoms of depression. But when we play games, we have the opposite experience. We feel physically energized, we have more motivation, we hunger for challenges that will be difficult, and we are optimistic about our capabilities. Now, the last thing I'll share with you that I think is really cool is we can see now, thanks to fMRI research, that gameplay is literally neurologically the opposite of depression. I think this is one of the biggest breakthroughs, certainly in game science in the last few years. What you're looking at here is the pattern of blood flow in the brain of somebody playing a video game, and this was done by Stanford University. And it's kind of amazing what they found. So by the way, if you're worried that video games make you or a loved one a brain-dead zombie, you can see here that the active side is someone playing a video game, and the passive side is somebody watching someone else play a video game. So if you are watching your children or your spouse play video games, you are the brain-dead zombie. And the gamer is the one with all this amazing activation, so keep that in mind. And they found that there were 2 patterns of activity that were really different for gamers than for non-gamers, 2 regions of the brain that were getting really lit up. The first is the sort of caudate thalamus region. That's the part of the brain associated with motivation. The more this part of the brain is lit up, the more likely you are to put all of your energy and attention towards achieving a goal. And the way that games manage to activate this part of the brain, of course, is that every game gives you a goal. You have to rescue the princess, you have to defeat the bad guys, you have to achieve a certain score, you have to collect a certain number of resources, you have to solve the puzzle. By playing a game, we accept a goal. So we turn on that part of our brain that's super motivated, and that will take all of our energy and attention to getting what we want. The hippocampus also lights up. This is the part of the brain associated with learning and memory. The more this part of the brain lights up, the more able you are to learn a new skill, to master it effectively. You'll remember information that you were exposed to. You're more likely to repeat a habit in the future that you were practicing at the time. And the reason why the hippocampus lights up when we play games is, of course, every game is designed for you to be bad at it the first time you play, right? Level 1 is pretty easy because the game designers know that you're not going to have the skills to succeed yet. And the whole joy of gameplay is mastering those skills and surprising yourself with what you're capable of. So the hippocampus goes crazy. Now, when you have these 2 parts of the brain lit up, you become what we've taken to calling super empowered, hopeful individuals. You're somebody who is more optimistic and ambitious about the goals that you can achieve, and you have the resilience you need to hang in there, to learn when things are difficult, and to acquire really significant skills and abilities. And there are many people like me now trying to take this super empowered, hopeful mindset and apply it to real world experiences, real world problem solving. I had the opportunity a few years ago to design a game to help myself recover from a traumatic brain injury. And we've helped more than 500,000 people now use these gamer strengths of creativity and motivation and the ability to get social support and collaborate to address their own health problems, like everything from trying to quit smoking or lose weight to dealing with new diagnoses of diabetes and asthma and cancer. And people are trying to use these super empowered, hopeful individuals to solve scientific problems, to change education, to start new businesses, to change how we do activism in this country. And so there are a lot of opportunities that I'm excited about, and maybe we'll talk about some on the panel, of how we can take this new mindset that gamers in particular have been growing up over the past generation with this super empowered, hopeful mindset, and hopefully we'll be using it for good in their real lives. Thank you.
Super. Thanks, Jane.
Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Could I just add something?
Yes, of course.
I just want to thank you, because Gadi and I were having a conversation before, and we were talking about international travel and how much we have to do a lot of that. And he was saying the great advantage for him is how much work he gets done on these in airplanes. And I was quiet, and I was thinking to myself, shit, I play Angry Birds all the time. So I want to thank you for that.
Your brain.
I'm smarter than you.
You're actually improving your brain while you do it.
I'm in the passive, regressive mode, whatever it is.
So now I get the interesting challenge of trying to bridge all three of these previous presentations in a few comments here. I'm Robert Tercek, and I've been working in the field of interactive design for more than 20 years. And I'm fascinated by this idea of hybrid experiences that extend from the real world or real devices into the digital world. And the term I use to describe this is vaporized. I have a book that'll be published in January of next year called Vaporized. Now, it's a funny word, vaporized. It brings to mind a ray gun, right? If you think about a science fiction movie, you know, you've seen that scene where someone points a ray gun at an object, they blast it with a ray gun, and it vanishes, it disappears, it's disintegrated into a puff of smoke. It's my belief that today we all have this power, but you don't need a ray gun to make something disappear. All you need is a cell phone, because the modern smartphone is actually making things disappear. 14 years ago, I was part of the team that launched mobile video on mobile phones, the ability to record, upload, and also display video. And a lot of people were confused by why we would even try to do that. If you think back to 2000, your mobile phone wasn't even that great for making voice calls, let alone text messaging in the US. So it was an ambitious idea. But along the way, we've actually achieved that. So today, it's no longer necessary for people to carry around all that gear. Last night at the unveiling, I noticed an awful lot of the journalists present didn't have cameras. They were carrying smartphones, and they were able to record without the need to carry battery packs and chargers and lenses and all the gear we used to carry. So we sort of vaporized the camera, but at the same time, we've also kind of vaporized the TV set. And this presents an interesting challenge to the television industry. They've never really had a competitor in the living room before, but today it's true that most people who have a smartphone or a tablet tend to multitask. Some estimates say that more than 70% of the people who watch TV are actually using their mobile phone, and often what they're doing is they're watching video on their mobile phone while they're watching TV. It might seem redundant, it might seem like a paradox, but that's some of the new user behavior you could never have anticipated in advance. Of course, now that the processors and the screen resolution are so very good and the bandwidth is available, you can actually stream relatively high resolution video to the phones. And so it's a true replacement for a television set. And so it's my belief that TV is in the process of being vaporized. And we see signs of this all around us. For instance, right now, there are about 50 million people who subscribe to video services that are delivered over the internet to any device. This is facilities-free video, so you don't need to have a broadcast station or a transmission tower or a satellite uplink or satellites in the sky. None of that is necessary to launch one of these services. And so we've, in a way, vaporized TV infrastructure. But that's not all. What happens with video on a mobile phone is that we transform the experience. And this is perhaps the most exciting area of any kind of video programming in the world right now. There are thousands of ways for people to record and manipulate and share video on their mobile phones. And this is training us in an entirely new behavior, a new form of communication that we simply didn't have before. And so by vaporizing some equipment and the business model, I guess, of television, in that process, we've actually created and introduced a brand new behavior, and it's a very exciting area for design. And so when I use that term vaporized, what I mean is that we're turning physical things into invisible software that can be downloaded to a phone or any device. We've seen this now with books. Amazon now sells more e-books than they sell hardback and paperback books combined. The music industry's gone through a radical transformation in the past 10 years as we've shifted from buying physical media to downloads, and now we're moving into streams, invisible streams that can come to any device. As Jane mentioned, the game industry is evolving in this direction very, very rapidly as well. The game industry today has shifted entirely to digital devices, digital platforms. Downloads and streams seem to be the future direction, and mobile game revenue is on track to eclipse the revenue for console games in the next 2 years. We're also vaporizing some other things that don't come to mind immediately, but they're happening on the periphery. Things like maps. Remember, there used to be companies like Falk Publishing that had a big business, Rand McNally, publishing maps. But today you get maps on your phone that are so much more capable and so much better. I travel a lot for work, and now I find I used to have the habit of getting a map at the hotel. I no longer need to do that because the map on your mobile phone is far better. It tells you exactly where you are. It's in the language of your choice. It can show you what's around you, so it's got relevant context around it. And so one of the things I observe is that people don't migrate to these new devices, these new platforms, until they get an experience that's not just cheaper, but also better than the physical form. We don't tend to replace things until there's a better alternative for us, but then we do it en masse. And the through line on this concept is that whatever part of your business consists of information, it's probably going to be liberated and put on a digital network, whether you choose to do that or you let someone else do that to you. And so we hear this term disruption. Last night you heard from Clayton Christensen, who spoke at length about the concept. A big part of that is when companies let themselves be exposed to this concept of disruption. And often what that means is a new company will come and take the information content of your products and free it, liberate it, and put it on the digital network and distribute it. It's not limited to media. This trend can actually extend to hardware. If you consider back in 2002, this BlackBerry RIM pager was considered to be a smartphone at the time. It was smart because it incorporated the functions of 4 totally separate objects into one device. It was kind of handy for people. And of course, when Apple introduced the first iPhone in 2007, that was the beginning of the modern smartphone era, where we could incorporate the functionality of literally several different consumer electronics devices. It's worth noting that the Japanese electronics companies that make things like video cameras and voice recorders have noticed double-digit decreases in sales in the last 5 years since the advent of the modern smartphone. And so literally those industries are being absorbed into the mobile phone. So by the end of the decade, your typical smartphone had already absorbed the functionality of more than 25 different consumer electronics devices, relinquishing the need for you to carry around those devices with you and turning them literally into software that you could download, invisible software that could be downloaded to the device. Adding to that, we're now at the point where we have about 1.5 million apps. Every single one of those apps in the Google or Apple App Store represents something that used to be sold in a physical form. We no longer need to buy that. We no longer need to carry that around. So we're vaporizing quite a lot of aspects of industries, and in the process, we're reinventing them. The takeaway on this is that as goods become more information intensive, they start to lose their characteristics as physical products, fixed products, and they start to take on the characteristics of a responsive service. Whatever can be vaporized will be. Doesn't mean everything will be vaporized, but it's a fun experiment to try to think about what parts of your business can be turned into pure software. Sometimes it's a little bit chilling. The cloud is a great example. So it's handy for my metaphor to use the term cloud. Cloud infrastructure means that startup companies are no longer obligated to invest millions of dollars in servers, in hardware, so that they can launch their business. Today, you can put it on a credit card. For instance, these many services and many others all have one thing in common. They all ride on top of Amazon Web Services. So Amazon's infrastructure is now the thing that powers services like Netflix that we use every single day around us. Those companies are alleviated of the need to make massive investment in physical infrastructure. That means that we're going to see innovation happen much faster and at much lower price points. You've already started to see some evidence of that. My friend Andrew Hessel is a biologist, and he said to me quite confidently, he said, look, the next biotech billionaire is going to start his company at a Starbucks with a laptop and a smartphone. And I think that's very plausible today. You simply don't need to invest in physical infrastructure to launch a new business. So given the context of the meeting today, I thought I'd ask the question, join me in a little thought experiment, is it possible that the automobile could be vaporized? I know it seems kind of outlandish. On the other hand, many of us yesterday saw that virtual reality demo here at Ford in the Research Center, where you could kind of experience the interior of the car, and I think that's a step in that direction, right? They're turning the interior of the car into a kind of information that you can envision. It helps designers save time and money in the design process. One of the things I've noticed in consumer electronics is a trend towards faceless appliances. These are devices where the company that makes them decided not even to invest the money in the buttons and knobs and so forth to control it, but instead they said, here's an iPhone jack, just plug your phone in, and the iPhone becomes the way of controlling this experience. And we've seen something similar happen in cars. In Moray's presentation, he showed the taxi driver with the 6 screens. I've seen people do this. Everybody knows somebody who has a car where they don't quite like the nav system that they got, or they want to change it or tweak it in some way, personalize it, so they get Velcro tape out and stick their, their tablet onto the dashboard so that they can kind of modify that themselves. So car designers, of course, are alert to this possibility, and they're starting to find ways to integrate the apps that we have on our mobile phones so they can connect directly with the car. And so you can walk in with Spotify playing, or in this case, Mog, and the car is smart enough to pick that up, and it automatically continues in the car stereo system. Some car makers are starting to build mobile extensions, apps that actually talk to the car, that let you manage some of the functions. In this example, you can control the AC. So if it's a very hot day, you can cool your car down before you get inside of that hot, suffocating box. Some people take this idea and they extend it very far. This is a joke, but I love this picture because it shows you the concept of downloading apps to the car. It's kind of a radical notion, but you can envision the car as the next big mobile computing platform that will probably have apps available to it. And so in this visualization, someone made a kind of silly idea where there's a massive heads-up display on your dashboard with way too many apps competing for your attention. Probably not the scenario we hope for. But we are starting to see another big consumer behavior pattern, and that's coming from the sharing economy, where ride-sharing services like this and the new innovative car services like Uber and Lyft are giving people the ability to rethink their relationship with motor vehicles. They can start to see motor vehicles as something you can have on demand as opposed to something you have to own. And if you combine that concept with the new knowledge of autonomous vehicles, it's not too hard to make a leap sometime to the future where we might start to perceive cars not as something we need to own, but rather transportation as a service you could subscribe to, where you simply have a smartphone app or some wearable device, and you can summon vehicle transport whenever you need it. It'll be a robot that picks you up and drops you off, and when you get out, you don't have to pay, you don't have to park it, you simply walk away and it will go pick up the next passenger. So it's kind of a radical notion, but I don't think if you put those pieces together, it's too outlandish of a vision. My view is that this experience I'm talking about isn't limited to cars, it's not limited to media, it actually extends to many other fields, and I think this is one of the great marketing opportunities of our time. Because what marketers really do well is they create experiences for people, and there's a ton of creativity available to us at this intersection between the physical world and the virtual world. That's a great meeting place and a great opportunity for designers. So at this point, I want to encourage people to send in questions if you haven't done so already. Use the hashtag Designing Innovation on Twitter to send in those questions if you're watching the live stream. We'll also have people in a moment coming around with microphones for the people who are here in the audience. And I'm going to start with a couple of questions. So the first topic I want to address is emotion. Each of you in your own way talked about different emotions. Wonder, joy, the sense of mastery is something we were talking about before. Can you tell me, Jane, how you orchestrate an emotional reaction in your game designs?
Yeah, so when I design a game, I usually start by thinking about what would be an amazing and personally meaningful accomplishment for the player, because I make games that try to change something in a player's real life. So for example, I did a project with the New York Public Library where they wanted to get young people to come to the physical library. It's been vaporized. It's been replaced by Google search and Wikipedia. And they had some bad gamification ideas, which they will freely admit to, like giving people points for checking out books and things like that. But when you think about emotion, you think, what would give someone an emotional experience of the physical library so they would want to come back for the rest of their lives? So I created a game where if you came and played it, you, by the end of it, you've written a book, your own book, that can be printed on demand and put in the actual stacks at the library, and you're listed as a published author with the New York Public Library. And then you can bring your friends and say, here's my book, and you can bring your kids someday and try to create this lifelong relationship with the physical space.
So you're sort of hardwiring the emotion to the goal or the objective, I guess, that you're leading people to.
Yeah.
Is that similar in your work, in your line of work? You do deal with emotions and orchestrating emotions. How do you do that?
For me, it's a sense of delight that, there is, for me, the critical moment for every physical or non-physical product is the moment, the second where you actually been exposed to it, and you need to understand what it's supposed to be doing for you, and then it hits you, but it hits you in both, I would say, cerebral and emotional way. You understand the utility, but the way the utility is presented to you is innovative and enticing and emotional and exciting, and that creates this delight moment, which is kind of, for me, the white moment of revelation. Oh, this is cool, I want to do it.
That's the feeling of great design that most people can feel, but they can't put their finger on what they're experiencing. Of course, Moray, that fits right into your idea of first look, second look, this progression where you're really orchestrating an experience around an object.
But I thought it was interesting the way you wrote this, and I was reading it as e-emotion. So
that's right.
What is motion without emotion, in other words? And maybe if you vaporize the car, then you lose the emotion as well. And there's still, for me, driving and owning a vehicle is still a very emotional subject, and it's still, people remember their first car, people know their car, and so it's still very emotional. I think some of the scenarios of the future turn that emotion just into motion, just into mobility, and I think that emotion goes.
Suck the emotion out of it.
And it sucks the emotion out of it.
Oh, that's an interesting thought.
And it makes my job more difficult as well, because I think we need to retain that emotion in a vehicle.
Well, and as we spoke about it yesterday, so much of, at least in the United States, what we associate with a car are these ideals like freedom and exploration and adventure and so on. And there's an emotion connected to each one of those. And in our day-to-day life, we don't actually have that experience. Usually we're sitting on the 405 freeway going 2 miles an hour. But we like the notion that that's possible, that we have that as an available option to us in the future. And I do think if we switch to autonomous vehicles, some of that will be sacrificed inevitably.
But we'll get it back in Oculus Rift, right?
Right on. Yeah, we'll be wearing, exactly right. We'll be wearing some kind of AR headset.
Or we won't have autonomous vehicles the way it's been perceived now. There'll probably be both autonomous and non-autonomous. And there will be times you're stuck on 401, 405, and you just want to push a button and forget about it and just get home.
That's true.
But there'll be, half an hour later, I was just talking to Moray that cars are now 0 to 60, which is exactly the on-ramp. You go 0 to 60 to 20. So that's the visceral moment.
Part in California.
Yeah, that's exactly the 10 seconds you need to feel the car, and that's enough.
And that feeling is important. That's another aspect of emotion, right? Emotions are feelings in motion. A car kind of embodies that. And one of the other things I was thinking about as you were doing your presentation, Gadi, is the parts of the experience that we see or can touch. Right? So much of what we experience as design is visual. Maybe more than half of our brain is devoted to visual information processing. But the other half of design is the part that you don't see. Can you talk a little bit to me about that? Because in your line of work, half of what you do is a physical product, but the other half is software. How do you make that decision? How do you decide what part goes where?
So actually, the fascinating thing about what we do now in technology design is the ability to reconfigure or basically set the architecture for both the hardware and the software to some degree. And that's basically setting the rules. And we try, obviously, to take social and business impact into account, but at the same time, a lot of it is still traditional play and experimentation. And then we actually test it within our own group, and there's always a project group, which is the client and us together. And if we see that smile of delight, we know we are onto something. And for instance, this project Aura, it really happened because the project management was laboring on a giant PowerPoint deck, and we just put the model in front of them. And everybody immediately gravitated to the model and started playing with the modules and all that.
Because it's like Lego, yeah, sure.
Yeah, and then you don't have to explain much.
Right.
That's the magic. You basically created intuitive storytelling that within a second or two you understood what the object is about. And that's something that we try to replicate. How can I communicate complex topics immediately, intuitively, with that smile?
That has to be one of the biggest challenges in car design, because there's a lot of complex technology, and candidly, for people who aren't technology fans, which is most people, that can be kind of thwart you as you get into a new vehicle. So I think part of when we talk about seen and unseen things, one thing that is largely unseen in cars is all the immensely complex technology that's behind the dashboard. How do you contend with that? How does a designer
Well, I think you're right. I mean, we need to be cautious also, just not showing off the technology for that sake, because people really want to be able to have a simpler life and not a more complicated life. And so it's getting that balance of seen and unseen. And we've actually, we've maybe over-erred in some ways and gone other ways. And we learn from the customer really what they expect to see, what they expect to be able to touch. And I think the future will be, when can I see it when I need to see it, as opposed to I need to see it all the time. So I think what's really what we need to look at is how can we predict the customer's behaviors and have the ability for something to appear when they need it, as opposed to there all the time when they don't need it. So I think that's something we need to be talking about.
Another big aspect of interior design I just learned yesterday is the artful disguising, using different textures and light effects so that volumes seem different, shapes may seem different. Sometimes the pillars are quite wide because there's airbags and big structural requirements around those. But the idea is to make them visibly appear to be a little bit smaller, thinner, sleeker.
And also trying to, again, coding the car for what the customer's expectations are. A Mustang interior is different from an Edge interior, for example. The Edge needs to be more spacious, needs to be more family friendly, it needs to be more, space oriented. Where a Mustang you want to be cocooned in a Mustang, you want to be driving it like an airplane. So I think there's a different aspect of each vehicle we do in terms of what that's seen and what unseen is.
Very interesting. Now, in the game design world, this is always a factor, right? Because you can't give someone a manual, a big 90-page manual, and say, okay, read this before you start the game. So some of it has to be designed for intuition and allow people to freely explore and discover.
Right. Well, I mean, so there's both the interface, is it sort of visually clear what I'm supposed to do, but also thinking about skills and abilities very, very concretely. What does somebody need to know how to do in order to succeed in this game? They might need to know how to navigate. They might need to know how to interact with different objects. They might need to know how to manage their resources inventory. And the best way to get people to learn that is to give them a goal that requires them to quickly adopt that skill. So I think about that sort of intuition, that you drive that actually through good goal design. You get somebody motivated to do something, and then they learn.
They'll figure out the rest.
Yeah, they will figure out the rest. Yeah. So if somebody's motivated, they learn anything.
Well, I promised to open the floor up, and I don't want us to, I could talk to you guys all day long, but I want to make sure that we have time for questions from the floor. So Jen and Francesca have microphones for those in the audience who might wish to ask a question. If there are any questions from the floor, please go ahead and raise your hand. Any takers? And then we also have questions from the internet. So here's one from Twitter. Brendan Sonnenhalter sends in a question for the entire panel. Your favorite example of great design from the past year, but it can't be one that you were involved with. So whoever's ready to answer that question, your favorite design example that you didn't personally do from the last year?
Well, I take a lot of design inspiration from the world of theater, actually, live events.
Yeah.
And there's an increasing merging of theater and game design right now. So there's a wonderful production in London called The Drowned Man by a theater group named Punch Drunk. And they took over this giant building, and there were probably 40 different physical spaces that you could explore over the course of the evening as you followed different characters around.
Wow.
And you could touch anything, and you could, you were talking about that sense of freedom and adventure. Any prop that's out, you can touch it, you can smell it, you can read it, you can move it, you can go through any door. There are like wardrobes. If you move the clothes, you sneak through passageway in the real world. And I just thought it was a gorgeous, ambitious demonstration of how we can create the feelings of gameplay in real physical spaces and in real life.
It sounds like they pulled in elements from what we'd associate with a computer game or a video game and brought those into the real world.
Yeah.
That's kind of a cool transformation. Have you got an example you can share?
I'll jump in and say that Nest thermostat is actually an amazing achievement, because we all forgot about our thermostat. I don't know if we even touched them once in a blue moon in the winter, probably, and so on. In California, obviously, I don't know. Not in Detroit. But here's something that is both beautiful, has a very interesting interaction, and it opens up a whole economy of dealing with pricing of energies and so on. And it suddenly makes people aware that there is a thermostat, and you actually have to interact with it somehow.
And it gives you a little analytic dashboard on your phone so you can see your energy usage, your habits.
Sometimes too much data, but it's still.
But it's visualizing something you wouldn't see otherwise.
Amazing achievement in that.
Cool, right on. Moray, have you got an example?
Yeah, I was, I think I was in Las Vegas for a Mustang launch, and in the hotel we were staying in. And it's not very good brand recognition because I can't remember if it was Chanel or Cartier, but there was a display in the window, and it was bent pieces of gold wire. And they were sort of coming out of the wall, but a light was shining on these wires, and it was reading out a word. So they were actually using this beautiful sort of interaction of just gorgeous pieces of bent wire, but as the shadow of that wire actually had a phrase written down. It was just, and I really hope someone did that manually and didn't put it in a computer and work out how to bend the wire to make these words read. Because it was just a lovely piece of just using design in just such a natural way, but at the same time, just very innovative.
One of the things that surprised me in our conversation earlier is both of you have such great appreciation for the handmade.
Yeah.
Right? We tend to think nowadays everything you guys do is on a computer, it's all computer-aided design, and that's definitely a part of it. But what I'm impressed by is that you begin with drawing, you begin with touch, you begin with something tactile. Here at Ford, you're still making cars using clay models.
Yeah.
I thought that was a thing of the past. I was quite stunned to see that. And I think it's kind of cool. The hand of the creator is still there.
And I think that's still very important. I still think, just making things is very important. It teaches you a lot, and you need to be able to make things, make mistakes, and really sort of learn how things are made as well. And we have some great craftsmen here, just in terms of not just making models, but just how we manufacture our products themselves. I think is a very important knowledge to have.
It is true. You have to, if you're doing something handheld as a designer, you're processing it through more motor centers in the brain. You're getting a better understanding of what that might be. Even if all that work is just preliminary exploration that you throw out later on, that's part of the process of discovering the solution.
There's always something that left. And the issue is the serendipity and the number of iterations that your brain goes through. And that is something that the hand sketch or the clay model or the foam model just give you more data than a CAD program. And I've been using CAD for many, many years. It just never delivers that level of flow.
I think we've both experienced the sort of promise of digital modeling and what it can offer, but then we've even reverted back to a little bit more of manual modeling to really find out. So you can really touch. People don't buy digital cars yet. Yeah. They buy real cars, so we don't want to build real cars.
But one way to look at that is as digital technology frees us, right? It does free us, and it does certain things extraordinarily well. What that tends to do, it devalues certain skills in the real world, but it actually increases some skills that can't be replicated on the computer, and we tend to prize those things very much. I'm thinking in particular now of handmade objects, and I have a great affinity for SD now because we live in this world where so much stuff is mass manufactured. The idea of getting something that's custom made or handmade is actually, you prize that even more, I think. Let's take some more questions. So here from Twitter, Uli Ang has asked a question about whether design is purely a visual thing and how important are other senses in the design experience. So we spoke about this a little bit with seen and unseen, but tell me about how you address the whole sensory apparatus. Each of you, I want to hear how you go about doing that.
I mean, in game design, visuals are not necessarily very pivotal or central at all to what you're thinking. Design, I think about it as structure, how you structure an experience. The visuals might tell you what you're supposed to do, or they might provoke a desire to do something. But for me, it's much more about designing your motivation. So like, for example, I could design a game for you. A bad game would be you have 3 minutes to leave this room. I challenge you to see if you can do that. Go. That would be a bad game. As a good designer, I might make it more interesting by saying you have 3 minutes to leave this room without anybody touching the floor at all. And immediately, you have to start now thinking more creatively and more collaboratively and cooperatively. Yes. No, I'm sure the fire marshals would hate it because we'd have to build stuff. But that's design. It has nothing to do with visuals. It has to do with how I design your motivation and how I limit your strategies. So, and game design is a very different field from something like the aesthetics of form.
I think if there's something that we all share is that definition is a common misconception about design.
Yes.
Design is nearly the opposite of it. Even though it's presented visually and most people see it as a visual interaction, we actually deal with it on a completely other levels. I mean, for me, it's the tactility of the object, it's how you operate it, how you hold it, how it age. and can it sustain its functionality for 7 or 10 years, and how you could augment it and make it your own. You talked about Etsy. This is the big thing now, is that people still crave their own visceral, tactile experience with the object. For instance, people are buying old motorcycles, so they could still fix them, because the modern ones you cannot fix. So they really want to get their hands dirty with grease.
I think part of the dynamic is that everybody can see, I mean, most people can see, right? And most people who can see have a favorite color. And so they tend to look at design as, you know, picking out colorways. That's a piece of it, right? That's certainly an important component. And it's so easy to access, and everybody has that language accessible to them, so they start to focus on that. But what I'm gathering in my conversations with you this week is that designers have to be conversant with the full range, the full palette of everything that stimulates us in our sensory apparatus, everything that can stimulate an emotion, and everything that we can learn from it, to your point. And so that's not limited in any way to the visual.
And I think it's the job of designers to actually communicate that as well, because I think in our industry we suffer from being seen as the stylist.
Yes,
you know, and
that's
I think,
true.
although the aesthetics of a vehicle are very important, it's not just what we do. We really do discuss the experience. We talk about how the interaction is. And I think, you know, design is such a dangerous word in some ways, because it can mean so many different things to different people. I mean, you saw the image I put up there of the car designer. All these people were designers in some way, but you know, I think there is a much more, I would say, deeper thought in most of our heads than people may think that the sort of designer does.
Are there questions from the floor? I'd be happy. Oh, there is. Okay, so Francesca, yes, please.
Hey, my question is, I think for Jane or for everybody. I loved the end of your talk where you talked about how to use this collaboration and all of these amazing things with the video games into doing something good. And I saw that 1 hour spent playing video games each day, and I'm in the sustainability environmental world and looking at it from that other side of now children spend less than an hour outside each day. And then also the idea of where you talked about how do you get people to solve a problem? You know, or how do you get them to be creative or whatever? You present that problem, get them to figure out how to use the tools. Before, I think, like when I was growing up, I would just go outside and figure it all out on my own, right? So could you talk a little bit more about that end of your story and the end, and like, what are some examples of how can we engage? You know, I don't think creating a video game about interacting with the environment is the way to do it,
right,
you know? So.
Exactly.
Oh, what a great question.
Yes.
So examples of gamification. That
and by the way, I don't use the word gamification. I hate it.
Oh, okay, fine.
But because it sounds so exploitive, and you know, we should just empower gamers to use their skills and abilities. So just a few really quick examples. And if you're interested in more, there's a great organization called Games for Change that curates, you know, hundreds of these examples. But you know, you might be interested in a project that I write about in my book called Ground Crew. And it was basically Farmville for your local community. So you know, there was a point when 1 in 12 people on the planet were playing Farmville. It was unbelievable cultural saturation. And so you, I'm sure, saw that part of the game was about getting requests to help your neighbors go water their virtual crops or feed their virtual chickens. So there was a real-world version of Farmville created on a platform called Ground Crew, where you'd be walking down the street and you get a request, you know, will you water these crops or feed these chickens? But it's real crops and real chickens, and it's using the GPS on your phone to send you to a local community garden or an urban farm. And communities needed something like this, because although it's easy to get funding from, you know, government or foundations to set them up, if the community doesn't work the gardens or the farms, then they don't thrive, and it's not in funding to pay people to do this. They need volunteer participation. So communities that adopted this saw an increase in their volunteer base of 100 times, not 100%, but 100 times. So they go from 4 volunteers to a base of 400, just by adding this virtual layer that was familiar. Gamers know what it means to do these things in Farmville, so it mapped really easily to the real world. So I think that's what we're looking for. There are games where Tetris players are working with scientists to do protein folding, manipulate objects in space to cure cancer. World of Warcraft players are using platforms like Ushahidi to do real-time disaster relief, because it's the same kind of skill set, that real-time organizing and collaborating. So we're just looking to map the skills and abilities and interactions into real life. If you're good at helping a neighbor on Facebook, maybe you're good at helping a neighbor in real life. I think that's the model that we want to follow.
Very cool. Jen, any questions from that side of the room?
I've got 2 more.
Okay.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Yoli. While you've seen an improvement in the gender gap in the game space of players, where is the gender gap, and not just game design, but design as a whole? There's a massive gender gap, especially with 53% of the women drivers dominating the market, but not enough female designers. And especially in the game space, that gap is not improved at all.
Yeah, I'll speak very quickly to it, and then you two can speak to the gender balance in design or more broadly. In the game industry, the statistics say that it's as bad as 7% in the industry when you take out like marketing and PR, 7% are women, which is terrible. One of the things that's changed it a lot is the rise of cooperative gaming and social gaming, because we know from research and demographics that women generally, when they have their choice, will play a social game or a cooperative game rather than a strictly competitive game or even a team-based competitive game. And the rise of this and the fact that 3 out of 4 gaming dollars are now spent on co-op and social is good news, because those are the games that women intuitively like to design as well. So we are seeing within the industry, those are the spaces where more women are coming in. And hopefully as that expands, we will see more women in that field. But I always say to folks that are trying to bring women into the industry to make sure that you're not building into your company the same kind of competitive infrastructure or work processes that might be reflected in video games, because that's not the games that women are by and large playing, and it's not the kind of workspace that they want to be in.
That's a really interesting observation, that last part about the culture of the company.
Yeah.
'Cause it's true, right? Early game companies were kind of a power environment, and that attracted a certain kind of person who liked that experience, but there's a lot of people who are deterred, people of both genders who are deterred by that. Tell us about gender balance.
Well, we were talking about this earlier, actually. I mean, and you know, we do not have many female designers in the business, and you know, it's not for we don't want them. We just find that the education system doesn't drive them into wanting to do engineering, wanting to do product design, and I think it's really a case of, you know, if anyone out here can help us get more female designers, we're really willing to take them. But it really is a case of, you know, the society at the moment is still sort of pushing females away out of technical engineering courses, I think, and I think we need to try and find out ways to move that.
I think I want to add to that that there's been a lot of strong, supportive push towards having women in what is so-called leading professions, whether it's medicine or law or politics and so on. And to some degree, I think a lot of creative individuals could have been wonderful artists or designers and were maybe pushed towards more achieving type of professions. And I think generally in product design, it's a relatively unknown profession. It's a somewhat more risky career move because there aren't million industrial designers out there. And I think this is part of the story. The other part of the story, again, I think in the process of education, there should be a real emphasis on creating really parity rather than emphasizing differentiation. I think there are some levels of skills that just need to be there. And with that said, I think it's absolutely a goal for me, and as I just heard with Moray, to get more women into our profession, because we need them.
Yeah, agreed. A long time ago, I worked at MTV, and it was the most insanely diverse place I've ever worked, and it was an incredibly creative place at the time. And I stopped in the president's office to ask her about this. I said, this is really cool. Like, how did you manage to get all these people together here and get them to work together so successfully? And she said, look, our philosophy is simple. Our philosophy is that our company should look like our audience. And I think this is true of every company, every organization that's represented here. The management philosophy is that we would like to get closer to our customers, and the best way to do that is to make the company resemble the people who are making the purchases. Surely that's true in the automotive world, because half your purchase decisions are being made by women, and of course that's true across all different ethnic diversities as well. It's not limited to gender question. So I think that's a great management philosophy. Are there other questions? Yes, Francesca.
I'll try and be succinct because we're towards the end. But Robert, my question was inspired by you talking about vaporization, and by Gadi, by you talking about an autonomous car maybe not being right, maybe it's semi-autonomous. The question really is, when it comes to design and innovation, at what point do we say we've gone too far? Or is there basically a point with this whole concept where maybe you could go there, but you shouldn't?
It's a great question. I'm going to defer the question to the panelists because I really want to hear what they have to say about it. These are working designers who are confronted with that issue every day. Because the concept work, you've seen concept sketches for cars that are amazing. And the question the consumer has is, how come we don't have those cars on the street? Where are they today? I'm going to turn that over to Moray.
Well, you know, in the 50s we thought we were going to have flying cars, but now
right. Yeah, where's my flying car?
But you know, and it's interesting because every time I have an interview just now, someone talks about autonomous cars. Everyone else talks about autonomous cars, and we inevitably get around to it. And I think really we need people to experience autonomous cars and find out if they really want them or not. You know, because I don't know what it's going to be like. I know, you know, I've been in an autonomous vehicle. You know, Metro Airport's got a train that goes backwards and forwards, and it's fine, but it's in a controlled environment. What's it going to feel like to be in an autonomous car with an environment with non-autonomous cars, semi-autonomous cars?
We don't know.
We don't know, and what's that experience going to be? Is it, you know, is it an experience that you feel intimidated in? Is it an experience you feel more freedom in? So I'm not saying that's the wrong thing, but I think we really need to test that hypothesis out and really find out what is that experience, and is it an enjoyable experience?
Almost certainly. It means it's going to take some time before this becomes a reality because there's such a learning curve, experience curve people have to go through. Gadi.
I want to jump in on that. One thing. The industry, the technology industry, has a very strong tendency towards hype. and one of my biggest problems in what I do is actually to kind of pull away from that hype and you know, find some anchor. And for me, the anchor is the human experience. Are people still enjoying driving? And in many cases, the answer is resoundingly yes. There are situations where you're stuck. The answer is definitely not. Now, let me take something that is even more specifically suggested. Okay, so you like driving, but a cabbie, a taxi driver, okay, we don't need them, right? Not true. I need them. I mean, I fly around the world. I actually have amazing, good discussions with cabbies. So we need human interaction. We need to deal with our rush for adrenaline. We need that. We are physical animals. And the whole notion that will be some kind of a computer node with a data stream into our mind, I think it's something that is driving a lot of these hypes, and we need to kind of cool down a little bit and understand that the reality will become a lot more complex and will allow us to be more data-driven or less data-driven, more visceral, more emotional people, and so on.
You know, you remind me of a conversation I had a while back in Japan with the head of NTT Docomo. That's one of the big telecoms companies in Japan, the mobile company there. And they said, we don't introduce technology as fast as the technology companies want us to do it. They said there's always new technology. Technology innovates at a pace that's too fast for most people. Moreover, they said we don't introduce technology at the pace that we, as a telecom company, wish to introduce it. We'd like to introduce it much faster. We're ready for it. Instead, they decided to introduce technology at the pace that people can teach each other a new habit. And I think this is a really cool takeaway. It's the pace that people can teach each other a new habit. And in their view, that was a 9-month cycle. So they introduced camera phones in black and white. 9 months later, camera phones with color. 9 months after that, camera phones with video, and so forth. They felt that that was the right length of time. If you think about it, that's quite long compared to the kind of pace of hyper-innovation that you see today in consumer electronics and in technology. We're introducing things so rapidly. Most people have a sense of overwhelm and they're confused by it. That's not a great consumer experience. I'll submit to you, any product that makes people feel stupid is a bad product design. A big part of what this gifted group of designers does is they sweat the details so that it seems simple. Even if there's tremendously complex technologies enabling it, they make that disappear. That's part of the vanishing act. That's part of the magic of design. I think we're coming into the end of the session now. If there is one more question, there isn't? Okay. Well, then I guess I'll thank my panelists very much. Moray, Gadi,
thank you very much.
Thank you very kindly. Thanks.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure.